A wealthy duke found a desperate serving woman with her baby freezing in Christmas snow, unaware she held proof his mother was murdered. What he offered as mercy would become the key to exposing the killer living under his own roof.
Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
The snow that Christmas morning fell heavy as judgment over Philadelphia's cobbled streets. Gerard Sutherland, Duke of Ravenswood, stepped down from his carriage onto Rittenhouse Square, the bells of Holy Trinity Church ringing across the frozen city. He'd crossed an ocean to close the final chapter on his late mother's American affairs, the townhouse she'd kept here, the investments she'd managed independently, the life she'd built far from Yorkshire's suffocating propriety. 2 years since her death, and still the questions gnawed at him. Why had Mother seemed frightened in her final letters from Philadelphia? Why had she died so suddenly, just 3 days after returning to England? "Your Grace, the solicitor is waiting," his uncle Ambrose called from the carriage, impatient and cold. "Let us conclude this business and return to civilization." But Gerard had stopped walking. There, against the iron fence surrounding his mother's former townhouse, 2 dark figures lay crumpled in the snow. A woman's body curved protectively around a bundle that whimpered with weak, desperate cries. The morning light caught on her face. She was black, younger than her exhaustion suggested, with snow clinging to a worn shawl that had long since lost its warmth. Instinct made Gerard move toward her. Propriety and his uncle's sharp intake of breath demanded he continue on. But something in that maternal shield against impossible cold struck a memory of his own mother cradling him through childhood fevers, whispering that love meant standing between those you cherished and every cruelty the world could muster. "Madam," he called, kneeling in the snow that soaked through his traveling coat. The cold bit like teeth. The woman lifted her head. Her dark eyes held the peculiar clarity of someone who'd already accepted death and found peace beyond it. "Your Grace," she whispered, recognizing the crested carriage, the fine clothing. "We require no charity. The Lord will provide." "The Lord has provided," Gerard said gently, removing his coat and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Through exceedingly poor weather and a stubborn duke. Please, let me help you." The baby, barely a year old, coughed, a rattling sound that pierced the morning quiet. The decision made itself. As the woman struggled to stand, trembling and weak, Gerard caught her elbow. "I am Gerard Sutherland, Duke of Ravenswood. I know who you are, Your Grace." Her voice carried the soft edges of the American South layered over something else. Education, perhaps, or simply dignity that no circumstance could strip away. "I've been waiting for you. I'm Missy Jackson, and this is Pearl." Something cold that had nothing to do with snow settled in Gerard's chest. "Waiting for me? How could you possibly?" "Your mother, the Duchess Catherine, told me you'd come to Philadelphia this Christmas." Missy's voice broke. "She said if anything happened to her, you'd return to settle her affairs. She made me promise to find you, to tell you the truth before it's too late." Behind them, Lord Ambrose's voice cut sharp through the morning. "Gerard, this is unseemly. The woman is clearly deranged. Leave her to the city's charitable institutions." But Gerard couldn't look away from Missy's face, from the desperate hope warring with resignation in her eyes. "What truth? That your mother didn't die by accident?" Missy clutched Pearl tighter, as if the child were both anchor and evidence. "That she was murdered, and that I'm the only witness left alive." The church bells rang again, celebrating the Savior's birth. Passers-by hurried past, heads down against the cold, carefully not seeing the Duke kneeling in the snow with a black woman. Somewhere in the distance, carols drifted from open doorways. Peace on earth, goodwill to men. Gerard felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he knew about his mother's death, his inheritance, and the woman who now sat trembling in the snow outside his mother's home. "Your Grace, I must insist," Ambrose began. "Uncle, secure rooms at the Belmont Hotel for Miss Jackson and her daughter," Gerard said, his voice carrying the authority that built empires and silenced objections. Private suite, meals sent up, physician summoned immediately. The private suite at the Belmont Hotel gleamed with gilt and gaslight, a mockery of comfort against the horror Missy Jackson was about to reveal. Gerard sat across from her as the physician finished examining Pearl, pronouncing the child stable but requiring rest and nourishment. Lord Ambrose had excused himself too quickly, Gerard now realized, citing urgent correspondence. "Tell me everything," Gerard said once they were alone. Starting from the beginning, Missy's hands trembled as she cradled a cup of tea. "I was your mother's lady's maid during her final months here in Philadelphia. She'd come to inspect the American properties, but she discovered something in the ledgers, discrepancies spanning 20 years. Money disappearing, falsified reports, forged signatures. Forgeries." Gerard leaned forward. "What kind of sums are we discussing?" "Hundreds of thousands of pounds, Your Grace." Missy's voice steadied with the telling. "Your uncle had been embezzling from the American estates since your father's death. But it was worse than theft. Your mother found connections. 3 wealthy widows who'd changed their wills in Lord Ambrose's favor, then died within months. Convenient deaths, she called them." The room seemed to tilt. Gerard gripped the armrest of his chair. "That's impossible. Ambrose is family. He's been the estate trustee since I was a boy." "Which is precisely how he did it." Missy set down her cup, meeting his eyes. "Your mother planned to expose everything to Parliament the moment she returned to England. She gathered evidence, made copies, consulted with American solicitors. She told me she'd finally found the courage to act, that she'd spent too long protecting the family name at the cost of justice. Then why didn't she?" The question came out harsh. "Why die in a carriage accident before?" "There was no carriage accident in England, Your Grace." Missy's words fell like stones into still water. "Your mother died here, in Philadelphia, in my arms, on November 20th, 1885. What returned to England was a closed casket and a lie." Gerard stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Snow continued falling over the city, peaceful and inexorable. "That's madness. I received telegrams from England. The funeral. I attended my own mother's funeral at Ravenswood Abbey." "You attended a funeral," Missy said quietly. "But who identified the body? Who insisted the casket remained sealed due to the severity of the injuries?" The answer sat like poison in his throat. "Ambrose. Your mother knew he was growing desperate. She told me he'd sent threatening letters, that she feared for her life. The night before she died, she gave me her journal, all the evidence, every detail documented. She transferred £5,000 to my name and told me that if anything happened to her, I was to wait for you. She said you'd return to Philadelphia this Christmas to settle her affairs, and that I was to give you the truth." A knock at the door interrupted them. A hotel porter entered with a sealed envelope. "Delivered by solicitor's messenger, Your Grace." Marked urgent. Gerard broke the seal. Inside was a photograph, his mother standing at Independence Hall beside Missy, both women solemn-faced and resolute. Tucked behind it, a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "The serving woman knows what the family wants buried." His blood ran cold. "Who sent this?" "I don't know," Missy whispered, pulling Pearl closer. "But Your Grace, there's something else. The journal your mother gave me. I sewed it into Pearl's blanket for safekeeping. But 3 days ago, a man came to the boarding house where I'd been staying. He claimed to be a private investigator named Thaddeus Crane. He said I'd stolen money from your mother's estate and that I'd hang for it. The £5,000, Gerard said slowly. Someone knows about the transfer. I ran. I had nowhere to go, no money left after months of waiting, hoping you'd come, as your mother promised." Missy's voice cracked. "I was prepared to die in that snow, Your Grace. But I couldn't let Pearl die without someone knowing the truth. Your mother's last words were, 'Find Gerard. Tell him Ambrose knows. Tell him to trust no one but you.'" Gerard stared at the photograph, at his mother's face, determined, almost defiant. She'd orchestrated this meeting from beyond the grave, knowing her son would need proof he couldn't dismiss. "Show me the journal," he said. With trembling hands, Missy unwrapped Pearl's blanket and carefully unpicked the stitches along the hem. From within the worn fabric, She withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Catherine's elegant script. Gerard read through the night, his face growing paler with each entry. November 15th, 1885. I feel unwell. The tea Ambrose insisted I drink before bed has left me weak and trembling. I've written to Dr. Randolph, requesting he preserve evidence should I not survive. Ambrose arrived in Philadelphia unexpectedly 3 days ago. He knows I've discovered everything. November 18th, 1885. The poison is working faster than anticipated. I've transferred the money to Missy and given her instructions. If I die, the truth lies in Dr. Randolph's laboratory at Pennsylvania Hospital. Ambrose believes he's won, but I've ensured my death will purchase something more valuable, my son's moral education. The final entry was barely legible, written in a shaking hand. Tell Gerard to trust no one but Missy. Tell him Ambrose has done this before. Tell him to choose honor over inheritance. See, 3 days later, Gerard arranged a private Christmas dinner at the hotel. Inspector Gideon Hartwell of Scotland Yard, who'd been investigating Ambrose's connection to suspicious deaths, sat disguised as an English business associate. Lord Ambrose arrived punctually, his composure seemingly restored. To family, Ambrose proposed as wine was poured, his smile practiced and cold, and to the wisdom of knowing which battles are worth fighting. As glasses were raised, Mr. Theodore Barnes, the hotel's head steward who'd served Catherine faithfully, suddenly stumbled forward. Wine splashed across the white tablecloth as Missy's glass shattered on the floor. "Forgive me," Barnes gasped, but his eyes met Gerard's with desperate urgency. "Your Grace, a word. Please." In the corner, Barnes whispered frantically, "The wine, sir." I saw Lord Ambrose add powder from his ring, the same substance I witnessed in Her Grace's final tea in Philadelphia. The same ring he wore then. Gerard's blood turned to ice. He strode back to the table and seized Ambrose's hand, forcing open the signet ring despite his uncle's protests. Inside the hidden compartment, white residue, unmistakable. Arsenic, Inspector Hartwell said, rising and removing his disguise. The same poison found in the tissue samples Dr. Randolph preserved from the Duchess Catherine. Ambrose's composure shattered. His face contorted with rage as he lunged from his chair. She was going to destroy everything. 20 years, I built that fortune while your father gambled it away. Catherine discovered the ledgers and threatened to expose me before Parliament. For what? American properties and the word of a Negro servant. For justice, Gerard said coldly. For the 3 widows you murdered. For the estates you plundered. For the mother you poisoned. She should have died quietly. Ambrose screamed, grabbing for Missy. Just like this woman should have frozen in that snow where she belonged. I won't hang for doing what was necessary to preserve our family's position. 2 Philadelphia detectives emerged from the adjoining room, restraining Ambrose as he thrashed and shouted. Inspector Hartwell produced Catherine's journal, now entered as evidence alongside Dr. Randolph's autopsy report and testimony from the hotel staff. As they dragged Ambrose away, still raging about bloodlines and propriety, Gerard knelt before Missy and Pearl. The child reached for him, babbling "Papa," her first clear word. "My mother sent you to save more than my inheritance," Gerard said quietly. "She sent you to save my soul. Will you help me finish what she started?" Missy's tears fell freely as she took his offered hand. Outside, church bells rang across Philadelphia, and for the first time since that snowy Christmas morning, the sound carried only joy. Justice had finally come home. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales where faith, courage, and justice triumph over corruption, where ordinary people become instruments of extraordinary redemption, and where love proves stronger than society's cruelest boundaries. Gerard and Missy's journey continues, but only subscribers will witness their fight to build a family that defies an empire. Don't miss what happens when they return to England and face a society determined to destroy them. Subscribe now, because some revolutions start with a single act of mercy in the snow. 6 months after Ambrose's execution, Gerard stood in the library at Ravenswood Abbey, the same room where his mother had planned to expose the corruption that killed her. England had not welcomed him home as a hero. Society had branded him a traitor to his class for employing Missy as head housekeeper and raising Pearl as his ward rather than sending her to an orphanage where she belonged. The letters piled on his desk told the story. 43 demands that he dismiss Missy for propriety's sake, including one from the Archbishop of York threatening to refuse him communion. Invitations that once flooded the estate had ceased. Former friends crossed the street rather than acknowledge him. The House of Lords whispered that grief had driven the young Duke mad. Gerard heard footsteps and turned to find Missy in the doorway, Pearl balanced on her hip. The child had grown healthy and bright, her laughter now filling halls that had been silent too long. "You wanted to see me, Your Grace?" Missy's voice remained formal despite the months they'd spent rebuilding the estate together, restoring what Ambrose had stolen, returning funds to the widows' families. "I've told you to call me Gerard." He crossed to his desk and retrieved a small velvet box. "And yes, I have something to ask you." Missy's expression grew wary. "If this is about the letters, I can leave quietly. I've saved enough for my wages to book passage back to Philadelphia. You've done more than enough for us." The Archbishop also refused communion to the abolitionists, Gerard interrupted. "I find myself in excellent company." He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not his mother's family heirloom, but a new one of sapphire and gold, designed specially. "I'm not dismissing you, Missy. I'm asking you to marry me." She stepped back as if struck. "That's impossible. The scandal would destroy everything your mother fought to preserve." "My mother fought to preserve truth and justice, not reputation." He moved closer, his voice gentle but firm. "She sent you to me not just as a witness, but because she knew I needed someone who values faith over fear. Someone who would cross an ocean on nothing but trust in God's providence. Someone who sees Gerard, not the Duke of Ravenswood." "You'll lose everything," Missy whispered. "Your position in Parliament, your influence, your place in society. I'll lose the wrong things and gain what matters." He knelt before her, proper and formal despite the revolutionary nature of the act. "Missy Jackson, will you marry a reformed duke and help him build the kind of household his mother died envisioning? Where Pearl grows up as our daughter, not a ward. Where people are measured by character, not color or class. Where we prove that mother's faith in redemption wasn't misplaced." Tears streamed down Missy's face. Pearl reached out, touching both their faces, babbling Mama, Papa, the name she'd learned to call them both. "Your mother's final journal entry," Missy said, her voice breaking. "I never showed you all of it." She retrieved the journal from her pocket and opened to the last page. Gerard read his mother's shaking words. "I pray Gerard finds the courage I found too late. That he builds the family I should have built. That he proves redemption is possible, even for English dukes. Missy Jackson is the finest woman I've known. Educated, faithful, courageous. She deserves better than servitude. If my son is half the man I believe him to be, he'll see what I saw. That God's image comes in every shade, and that the greatest revolution isn't political, it's personal. The revolution of a heart that chooses to love beyond the boundaries society draws." Gerard looked up at Missy, then at Pearl, then at the library that had witnessed so much darkness. Through the window, snow began to fall, gentle English flakes that transformed the Yorkshire moors into something beautiful. "She planned this," he said softly. "Every detail. She knew you'd find me. She knew I'd fall in love with both of you. She orchestrated her own death to teach me what truly matters." "And what's that?" Missy asked, though she already knew the answer. He rose, drawing her close. "That faith without action is dead. That love is the only revolution worth fighting. That my mother's final gift wasn't evidence or money, it was you." Pearl laughed, reaching for them both, and, in that moment, the revolution was complete. The village church stood defiant against the gray Yorkshire sky, its ancient stones bearing witness to ceremonies both sacred and scandalous. Inside, on a mild spring morning that felt like benediction, Gerard Sutherland prepared to commit social suicide. Only one priest in all of England had agreed to perform the ceremony, Father Michael Brennan. an Irish clergyman who'd been censured by the archbishop for preaching that Christ died for all people, not just the acceptable ones. The pews held no lords or ladies, no members of parliament, no titled relatives who might lend respectability to the proceedings. Instead, they were filled with tenant farmers and their families, village shopkeepers, the household staff who'd remained loyal despite society's pressure. Mr. Theodore Barnes had traveled from Philadelphia, as had Dr. Samuel Randolph, the physician who'd preserved Catherine's evidence. Inspector Hartwell sat in the front row beside Mrs. Dorothy Finch, the housekeeper who defied Ambrose from the beginning. As Missy walked down the aisle in a simple ivory gown, Pearl toddling beside her as flower girl, Gerard felt his mother's presence as surely as if she stood beside him. This was the family Catherine had died to create, built not on bloodlines, but on choices, not on propriety, but on principle. Dearly beloved, Father Brennan began, his voice carrying to the rafters, we are gathered to witness a holy rebellion, not against God, but against the lies we tell ourselves about who deserves his grace. Outside, a crowd had gathered, not well-wishers but protesters. Gerard could hear their chants through the stone walls. Shame on Ravenswood! Disgrace to England! The local magistrate had threatened to arrest Father Brennan for performing an unnatural union. 3 newspapers had sent reporters to document what they called the fall of a great house. Missy's hand trembled in his. Gerard squeezed it gently and whispered, steady. We've faced worse than words. Have we? She whispered back. Ambrose tried to kill us. These people want to erase us. Then we'll prove impossible to erase. The ceremony continued. When Father Brennan asked if anyone objected, the church doors burst open. A delegation of peers stood in the entrance, led by the Earl of Pemberton, Gerard's cousin. This mockery ends now, Pemberton declared. Gerard, you've been one to appear before the House of Lords. Your title and estates will be stripped unless you abandon this madness immediately. The church fell silent. Pearl, sensing the tension, began to cry. Missy bent to comfort her, preparing to flee, but Gerard held her fast. I've already sent my response to Parliament, Gerard said calmly. They may take my title. They may seize the estates. But they cannot take what matters. This woman, this child, the truth my mother died protecting. I am the Duke of Ravenswood, not because of birth, but because I choose to be the man worthy of that title. And that man keeps his promises, especially to the dead. He turned back to Father Brennan. Continue, please. Pemberton sputtered threats, but Inspector Hartwell rose, his presence authority itself. The ceremony is legal under ecclesiastical law. Leave now, or I'll have you removed for disturbing the peace. The protesters withdrew, but their fury lingered like smoke. Gerard and Missy spoke their vows in the trembling quiet that followed, exchanging rings while Pearl clapped her small hands and called them Mama and Papa for all to hear. When Father Brennan pronounced them married, the tenant families erupted in cheers that drowned out the chants from outside. Dr. Randolph wept openly. Mrs. Finch embraced them both, whispering, the Duchess would be so proud. That night, in the library at Ravenswood Abbey, the 3 of them sat together while snow began to fall, impossibly, beautifully, as if Catherine herself was blessing them from beyond. Gerard held Pearl while Missy read aloud from the journal, sharing Catherine's words with the daughter who would grow up knowing her story. Your mother gave us each other, Missy said softly. She gave us more, Gerard replied. She proved that redemption is possible. That faith isn't just believing God will provide. It's believing he'll provide exactly what we need, even when it destroys everything we thought we wanted. Through the window, snow continued falling, covering the abbey, the village, the church where they defied an empire. In Philadelphia, Independence Hall still stood witness to promises unkept. But here, in Yorkshire, a small revolution had succeeded, and Catherine's journal, passed now to Pearl's keeping, held the final truth, that the greatest inheritance isn't wealth or title, but the courage to love beyond fear. The snow fell softly, blessing them all. 1 year after the wedding, Gerard stood at his mother's grave in the chapel vault beneath Ravenswood Abbey. Parliament had tried to strip his title, but the evidence against Ambrose and the public sympathy for a son honoring his murdered mother had stayed their hand. He remained Duke of Ravenswood, though half of society still refused to acknowledge him. Pearl, now 3 years old, held a bouquet of winter roses. "For grandmother Catherine?" she asked in her clear, bright voice. "Yes, darling," Missy said, adjusting the child's coat against the cold. "The grandmother who made sure we'd find each other." They laid the roses on Catherine's tomb, and Gerard read aloud the inscription he'd commissioned: Catherine Sutherland, Duchess of Ravenswood. She chose justice over comfort, truth over tradition, and love over fear. Her greatest victory was not in dying, but in whom she trusted with her death. A commotion from above drew their attention. Mrs. Finch descended the stairs, breathless and beaming. "Your Grace, you must come quickly. There are visitors, dozens of them." They emerged from the chapel to find the courtyard filled with carriages. But these weren't the aristocrats who'd shunned them. Dr. Randolph stood at the head of a delegation of 50 Americans, black and white, freedmen and abolitionists, educators and ministers, all who'd heard the story of the Duke who'd chosen honor over empire. "Your Grace," Dr. Randolph called out, "we've come to propose a partnership. The Catherine Sutherland Foundation for Justice and Education. We want to build schools in both America and England, fund legal aid for the oppressed, and train the next generation to fight corruption wherever it hides. Your mother's death purchased more than your redemption. It sparked a movement." Gerard looked at Missy, who nodded through tears. "She'd want this," Missy whispered. She always said one courageous act could inspire thousands. Over the next hours, they planned Catherine's true memorial. Not a statue or monument, but a living legacy. Schools where black and white children would learn together. Legal funds to fight unjust laws. A network of safe houses for those fleeing oppression. The American estates Ambrose had plundered would now fund revolution, the kind fought with education, advocacy, and unwavering faith. That evening, as their guests departed, a carriage arrived bearing the Archbishop of York himself. Gerard tensed, expecting condemnation, but the old man emerged with humility etched on his face. "I was wrong," the Archbishop said simply. "I've read your mother's journal. Inspector Hartwell shared it with the church leadership. I read how she found Christ more clearly in the face of a black servant than in all our cathedrals. How she learned that faith means choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. How she trusted God enough to orchestrate her own death into a lesson for her son." He paused. "I've come to ask your forgiveness and to offer mine. The church should lead in justice, not lag behind it. Will you allow me to bless your family properly?" In the Abbey's chapel, with Pearl between them and Catherine's journal resting on the altar, the Archbishop blessed their marriage before God and witnesses. He blessed Pearl as their daughter, legitimate in heaven's eyes regardless of earthly prejudice. And he blessed Catherine's memory, declaring her a saint who taught us that God's image knows no color, and his love recognizes no boundaries man can draw. As they walked back to the house through fresh snow, Pearl stopped suddenly. "Papa, look, the snow is like grandmother's blessing, isn't it? It covers everything the same way, the houses and the trees and all the people. It doesn't care who's a duke and who's not." Gerard knelt beside her, his throat tight. "Yes, darling. Grace falls like snow, covering everyone who'll receive it." Missy joined them, and they stood together as a family while snow fell softly over Ravenswood Abbey. Inside Catherine's journal, tucked within Pearl's small hands, was the final page, one Gerard had only discovered that morning. Written in his mother's hand the day she gave Missy the journal. "If my death teaches Gerard that love is stronger than fear, that justice matters more than reputation, and that God works through the most unexpected vessels, then I have not died in vain. I have purchased something eternal, proof that redemption is possible, that courage is contagious, and that one woman's faith can change the trajectory of nations. Tell Gerard I'm proud. Tell Pearl she's loved. Tell the world that grace falls like snow on the just and unjust alike, and that the only question that matters is whether we're brave enough to let it cover us completely. Pearl looked up at her parents. "What does it mean, Mama?" Missy kissed her forehead. "It means your grandmother believed that one act of courage could change everything. That saving one life could save 1,000. That choosing love over fear is how we change the world." "Did it work?" Pearl asked. Gerard looked at his wife, his daughter. The abbey transformed from a monument to corruption into a sanctuary of grace, the movement spreading across 2 nations in Catherine's name. "Yes, darling," he said softly. "It worked." The snow fell heavier now, and somewhere in heaven, Catherine Sutherland smiled, knowing that her death in a Philadelphia townhouse had purchased more than justice. It had purchased a future where love conquered fear, where faith moved mountains, and where grace fell like snow on everyone brave enough to stand beneath it. This is the story Catherine died to tell, but it's only the beginning. Subscribe now to witness how Pearl grows into a woman who'll challenge both American slavery and British aristocracy. See how Gerard and Missy's love becomes a beacon for the oppressed across 2 continents. Discover how one duke's choice to honor his murdered mother sparked a movement that would shake empires. Their fight for justice, equality, and radical grace continues, and history is watching. Don't miss what happens when faith becomes action, when love becomes revolution, and when grace falls like snow on a world desperate for redemption. Subscribe today, because some stories don't just move you, they change you forever. 20 years had passed since that Christmas morning in Philadelphia. Pearl Sutherland, for Gerard had legally adopted her, making her a duke's daughter in every way that mattered, stood at the gates of Independence Hall, now a young woman of 23 with her mother's grace and her father's determination. Beside her stood James Hartwell, the inspector's son, who'd grown from a curious boy into an idealistic attorney devoted to civil rights. They'd fallen in love over law books and debates about justice, their courtship scandalizing London society all over again. A duke's adopted black daughter marrying the son of a police inspector. The gossip columns had feasted for months. "This is where it began," Pearl said, touching the building's stone facade. "Where Grandmother Catherine brought my mother to have their photograph taken. Where she declared her independence from everything England expected of her. And where you're about to declare yours," James replied, squeezing her hand. Inside the hall, representatives from 15 states had gathered for the first meeting of the Catherine Sutherland Society for Equal Justice, an organization that had grown from the foundation her grandmother's death had funded. Pearl was scheduled to deliver the keynote address, but her hands trembled with the weight of the moment. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "These people expect me to be like her, like Grandmother Catherine. Fearless, revolutionary. I'm just—" "You're Pearl Sutherland," came a familiar voice. Missy emerged from the hall shadows, still elegant despite the silver threading her hair. "You're the girl who learned to read by studying your grandmother's journal, who demanded entrance to Oxford despite them refusing to admit women, who's been arrested twice for peaceful protest and still believes the law can be changed from within. You're exactly who she hoped you'd become." Gerard appeared beside his wife, his face lined with age, but his eyes still sharp. "Your grandmother orchestrated her death to teach me a lesson. She trusted that I'd teach it to you, and now you'll teach it to a nation." Pearl looked at her parents, at the marriage that had defied an empire, at the love that had survived 2 decades of opposition. "What if I fail? What if all of this, the foundation, the schools, the movement, what if it's not enough to change anything?" "Catherine didn't die expecting to change everything," Missy said gently. "She died expecting to change one thing, her son's heart. Everything else grew from that single seed of transformation. You're not here to save America, Pearl. You're here to plant more seeds." Inside the hall, Pearl stood before the assembled delegates, former slaves and Northern abolitionists, Quaker activists and progressive politicians, educators and ministers who devoted their lives to justice. She carried no notes, only her grandmother's journal, worn now from years of study. "My grandmother died in this city 20 years ago," Pearl began, her voice steady. "Murdered by a man who believed power mattered more than truth that reputation mattered more than righteousness. She was an English duchess who could have lived in comfort and silence. Instead, she chose to see what others refused to acknowledge, that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. That God's image comes in every shade. That love is the only force powerful enough to overcome fear. She held up the journal. Before she died, she wrote that one courageous act could change everything, not because it succeeds, but because it inspires others to courage. She saved my mother, knowing that act would save my father's soul, hoping it might save mine, believing it could save countless others we'd never meet. Pearl's voice grew stronger. We gather in this hall built on promises America has yet to keep. But we gather because my grandmother proved that keeping promises matters more than protecting comfort. That one woman's faith can indeed move mountains, not by magic, but by choosing love over fear every single day until the mountain has no choice but to move. The delegates rose in thunderous applause, but Pearl saw beyond them, to the photograph on the wall behind the podium. Catherine and Missy, standing together at this very spot, solemn and resolute. Two women from different worlds, united by justice. That evening, Pearl walked with her parents through Philadelphia's snow-covered streets, back to Rittenhouse Square, to the fence where Missy had nearly died, where Catherine's plan had reached its crescendo. Do you ever wonder what she'd think? Pearl asked. If she could see how it all turned out. Gerard and Missy exchanged glances, the silent communication of 2 decades together. I think, Gerard said slowly, she'd say the work isn't finished. That every generation must choose courage again. That grace falling like snow means nothing if we refuse to stand beneath it. But would she be proud? Pearl pressed. Missy wrapped her arm around her daughter. She's watching 3 people stand together in the snow. A duke who chose honor over inheritance. A servant who chose faith over fear. And their daughter who chooses to fight for a world neither of her grandmothers lived to see. Yes, darling, she'd be proud. The snow fell softly over Philadelphia, covering the square, the fence, the place where everything had changed. And 3 generations later, Catherine Sutherland's revolution continued. Not finished, never finished, but alive in the hearts of those brave enough to believe that love, in the end, is always stronger than fear. The telegram arrived at Ravenswood Abbey on a winter morning much like that fateful Christmas decades ago. Gerard, now 72 and silver-haired, read it with trembling hands while Missy looked over his shoulder. It's from the London Law Society, he said quietly. They're awarding Pearl the Catherine Sutherland Medal for legal reform. They want us there for the ceremony. Missy touched his face gently. Your mother would have laughed at the irony. The same institutions that condemned us now honor our daughter in Catherine's name. Because Pearl made them see what Mother knew all along. That change doesn't wait for permission. The ceremony took place in Westminster Hall, beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed centuries of English law. Pearl stood at the podium in her barrister's robes, the first woman of color to argue before the High Court. Behind her, a portrait of Catherine had been commissioned. Not the formal Duchess from old paintings, but Catherine as she appeared in that Philadelphia photograph, standing with Missy, both women's faces set with quiet determination. Lord Chancellor Pemberton, the same cousin who tried to stop Gerard's wedding, stepped forward to present the medal. Age softened him, and genuine respect colored his voice. Miss Pearl Sutherland has achieved what many thought impossible. She has rewritten precedents, challenged unjust statutes, and reminded this nation that law divorced from justice is merely tyranny with a wig. He paused. She learned this from her grandmother, who taught us all, some of us too late, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Pearl accepted the medal, but instead of beginning her prepared remarks, she did something unexpected. She removed the medal and walked down from the podium, crossing directly to where her parents sat. She placed the medal in Missy's hands. "This belongs to you, Mama," Pearl said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "You're the one who carried grandmother's journal through snow and poverty and threats of death. You're the one who trusted God enough to wait in that snow, believing Papa would come. You're the one who showed me that true nobility has nothing to do with titles and everything to do with character. Missy's eyes filled with tears. Pearl, this is your achievement. No, Mama, it's ours. Every case I've won, every law I've changed, it's because you taught me that one person's courage creates space for another's. That grandmother's death only mattered because you lived. That revolutions don't start with grand gestures. They start with a woman refusing to let a baby die in the snow. The hall erupted in applause, but Pearl wasn't finished. She turned to address the assembly of Britain's legal elite. My grandmother, Catherine Sutherland, was murdered for threatening to expose corruption. For 20 years, no one questioned my great-uncle's convenient deaths, his forgeries, his theft, because he was a lord, and the victims were merely inconvenient. The same system that failed to protect her now honors me, her granddaughter. She let that sink in. This medal means nothing if we don't acknowledge the truth. That British justice has historically served British power, not British people. That we celebrated my admission to the bar's progress while ignoring that it took 3 generations and a murdered Duchess to achieve it. The room grew uncomfortable, but Pearl pressed on. Grandmother Catherine left me more than a journal. She left me a question. Will you use the system's power to maintain it or to transform it? Will you be comfortable or will you be courageous? She looked at the portrait behind her. Every day, I choose courage. Not because I'm fearless, but because she proved that fear is simply the price of admission to change. She returned to the podium and lifted Catherine's journal, the original, preserved all these years. I'm donating this to the British Library with one condition, that it be displayed alongside the Magna Carta. Not because my grandmother was royal, but because she understood what that document promised and Britain failed to deliver. That justice belongs to everyone, not just those born to privilege. The ceremony concluded in stunned silence, then gradually building applause. As they exited Westminster Hall, a young black law student approached Pearl nervously. Miss Sutherland, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I've been denied admission to 3 firms because of, well, she gestured to her face. I saw you argue the Thorning case. The way you dismantled that discriminatory statute gave me hope that maybe what? Pearl asked gently. Maybe the law could actually mean what it says. That all are equal before it. Pearl took the young woman's hands. My grandmother died believing that. My mother survived believing it. I fight every day to make it true. And now you will too. She glanced back at Gerard and Missy, standing together in the fading light. That's how revolutions work. They're passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, generation to generation. Catherine started it. My parents continued it. I'm carrying it forward. And now it's yours. That evening, the 3 of them sat in Catherine's library at Ravenswood Abbey, the room where so much had been lost and found. Gerard held Missy's hand while Pearl read aloud from the journal one final time, sharing Catherine's words with the daughter who now carried her torch. Outside, snow began to fall. It always snows at the important moments, Gerard mused. The day I found you both. Our wedding. Pearl's first day at Oxford. And now this. Grace falling like snow, Missy quoted softly, covering everything equally. Pearl closed the journal and looked at her parents. At 2 people who'd defied the world for love, who'd built a family from faith and courage, who'd turned tragedy into transformation. Do you think she knew? Pearl asked, that her death would lead to all of this. Gerard considered. I think she knew something better, that her death would matter because people like your mother would refuse to let it be meaningless. That courage is contagious. That one act of faith creates space for 1,000 more. The snow fell heavier now, blessing the abbey, the village, the nation slowly learning what Catherine had died teaching. That justice delayed is justice denied, but justice attempted, even at the cost of everything, is justice eternal. And in the library of Ravenswood Abbey, 3 people sat in grateful silence, knowing they were living proof that grace falls like snow on everyone brave enough to stand beneath it. Gerard Sutherland died on a Christmas morning, 50 years to the day after he'd found Missy and Pearl in the Philadelphia snow. He passed peacefully in his sleep, Missy's hand in his Catherine's journal on his bedside table, a life that had come full circle. At his funeral, Westminster Abbey was filled to capacity. The Archbishop himself officiated, declaring that the Duke of Ravenswood taught England that nobility is not inherited but earned, that courage is not comfort but conviction, and that love is not sentiment but sacrifice. But it was Missy's eulogy that silenced the crowded cathedral. 50 years ago, my daughter and I were dying in the snow. She began, her voice still strong at 73. We had nothing, no home, no hope, no reason to believe tomorrow would come. But Gerard knelt beside us anyway, not because he knew who we were, not because he expected anything in return, but because his mother taught him that love means standing between those you cherish and every cruelty the world can muster. She paused, looking at the mahogany casket draped in the Sutherland crest. He lost half his friends from marrying me. He was threatened with losing his title. Society called him a fool, a disgrace, a traitor to his class. And every single time, he chose us. He chose honor over inheritance. He chose truth over tradition. He chose love over fear. Her voice broke. He chose to be the man his mother died, believing he could become. Pearl stood beside her mother, now a renowned jurist with silver threading her own hair. Behind them sat 3 rows of their extended family. Pearl's children and grandchildren, a tapestry of faces and colors that would have been unthinkable in the England of Gerard's birth. My father taught me that revolutions are personal, Pearl added. That changing the world starts with changing one heart. His mother changed his heart in death. He changed mine in life. And together, they changed England, one law, one precedent, one courageous choice at a time. The burial took place in the chapel vault beside Catherine. As they lowered Gerard's casket next to his mother's, snow began to fall, soft, persistent, covering the mourners in white. Pearl's youngest grandson, Thomas, just 7 years old, tugged at her sleeve. "Grandmother Pearl, why is it snowing? It's not supposed to snow today." Missy knelt beside the boy, her eyes bright with tears and something beyond grief. "Because grace falls like snow, darling. It covers everyone equally, the duke and the servant, the powerful and the powerless, the deserving and the undeserving. And it always falls when God wants to remind us that love is stronger than death." "Did great-grandfather Gerard love you that much?" "More," Missy whispered. "He loved me enough to give up everything else. That's what grandmother Catherine taught him, that the only thing worth keeping is what you die to protect. And he protected us until his last breath." After the burial, the family returned to Ravenswood Abbey. The library had been converted into a museum dedicated to Catherine's legacy, her journal displayed in a glass case beside the metal Pearl had donated, alongside photographs spanning 3 generations of revolution. Visitors came from around the world to see where it all began. The room where Catherine documented Ambrose's crimes, where Gerard proposed to Missy, where Pearl studied law by candlelight, determined to finish what her grandmother started. Missy stood alone in the library that evening, touching the glass case that held Catherine's journal. "We did it," she whispered. "Gerard and I, we finished what you began. Pearl carried it further than you dreamed. Your death wasn't in vain." Through the window, snow continued falling over Yorkshire. Somewhere in Philadelphia, Independence Hall still stood. Somewhere in London, young lawyers studied Pearl's cases, learning that justice was worth fighting for. Somewhere across 2 continents, the Catherine Sutherland Foundation continued its work: schools, legal aid, advocacy for the oppressed. Pearl found her mother in the library and wrapped an arm around her. "What happens now, Mama?" Missy smiled through tears. "Now we rest. We've run our race, carried our torch. Your children and grandchildren will carry it forward. That's how it works. Catherine to Gerard, to us, to you, to them. An unbroken chain of courage, generation after generation, until the world finally learns what she died teaching. What's that? That one person's faith can move mountains. That love is always stronger than fear. That grace falls like snow on everyone brave enough to stand beneath it." Missy touched the glass case. "That revolutions don't end, they multiply. Every heart changed changes another. Every life saves 1,000 more. Every choice for courage creates space for someone else's bravery. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering the abbey, the chapel, the graves of two people who'd loved each other enough to defy an empire. And in the library, surrounded by the evidence of their revolution, Missy Jackson Sutherland, the servant girl who'd refused to die in the snow, finally understood Catherine's ultimate gift. It wasn't the money or the journal or even the truth about murder. It was the proof that God works through the willing, that courage is contagious, and that one act of faith on a Christmas morning can echo through eternity, changing laws, transforming nations, and teaching generations yet unborn that snow falls on everyone equally, but only the brave allow it to cover them completely. The library door opened. Thomas ran in, holding a snow-covered paper. "Grandmother Missy, I found this outside, tucked in the fence. It has writing on it." Missy unfolded the paper carefully. In shaky handwriting, a message: "Thank you for teaching me courage. Your story saved my life. Now I'll save another's." A grateful reader, Pearl read over her mother's shoulder. "They're still finding us, still learning from Grandmother Catherine's sacrifice. Because revolutions never end," Missy said softly. "They just find new hearts to change." Through the window, snow continued falling on Ravenswood Abbey, on England, on a world slowly learning what 3 women and 1 brave duke had died and lived to prove. That grace falls like snow on the just and unjust alike, and that the only question that matters is whether we're courageous enough to let it transform us completely. The revolution continues. The snow falls forever, and love, always, eternally, victoriously, conquers fear. Catherine's death in the Philadelphia snow was meant to change one man's heart. It changed 3 nations instead. This is the power of one courageous choice. It echoes through eternity, transforming everyone it touches. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you believe that one person's faith can indeed move mountains, then subscribe. Because there are 1,000 more stories like this waiting to be told. Stories of ordinary people who chose extraordinary courage. Stories of love that defied empires, faith that moved mountains, and grace that fell like snow on the undeserving. Stories that don't just entertain, they transform. Subscribe now and join the revolution that Catherine started. Because the world needs more people brave enough to kneel in the snow for a stranger. More people willing to sacrifice everything for truth. More people who believe that grace, in the end, covers us all. Don't just read about courage, become it. Subscribe today.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel. Every day, we will put out more stories, so we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it.